Bartholomew Town.
Welcome into Bartholomew Town. Remember, you can find us wherever you're listening right now, ripodcast.com, and weekends on WPRO Radio. I'm Bill Bartholomew. So we begin our year in review, so to speak, as we now are into December. And look, we've done this in different ways in the past. This year, we're going to bring you a couple of your favorite journalists in kind of one-on-one or small groups rather than have a million people on one podcast shouting over each other. These are super popular, and we appreciate everybody who listens. So we're kicking it off with a legendary voice, photographer, and person in our community, and that is the great Steve Klamkin, recently retired from WPRO Radio, but still out there making moves. Steve, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Bill, and it's good to see you. It's been a while, so I'm glad we could get together this way.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start right there with, I think it's a big story in general in terms of, obviously, it's a big story, the decline or changes in local media, but you retired from WPRO this year after an illustrious career, really one of the leaders of the, I would certainly say, of the reporting cadre here in Rhode Island. Your takeaways as a now retired radio reporter on this year for you, which I think was June, that was your retirement date.
It was, but now it can be told I was retired.
Yeah.
After I had some medical issues going back a year, and 3 surgeries this spring, and when I came back from medical leave, I was told that my position had been eliminated. And so, I was left on the beach, but I got to tell you, summertime's not a bad time to be on the beach.
Right.
And it was very enjoyable. I had, time to continue to recover. And I connected with my old friend, Reynaldo Almonte, who is the president and owner of Latino Public Radio. There's no radio in Latino Public Radio any longer. There was at one time. He's mainly online, and he's looking to expand the English language offerings and asked me to come aboard on a volunteer basis to start to see if we could do some things. And I thought it would be similar to a radio gig being online, but pretty much everything I've done with him has been on video. So for a guy who has a face for radio, as I always like to say, it's quite a change that, here I am. Getting a little dressed up, not much, but you know how that rolls.
Exactly. You got to have the multiple identities.
You have your TV appearances, and so you try to clean up a little for the camera.
It's a little different in terms of we'll put it this way. Sometimes the radio performers that you hear on WPRO are not necessarily dressed to appear at Carnegie Hall, put it that way.
Yeah, and sometimes they're even in their jammies.
Truth be told, that is a fact.
You go.
Not this guy and not you. I'll say that for the record.
No.
Never. What is it right now that strikes you as the bigger concern in terms of the changes in media? Is it the broad shift in reporting and the broad shift in outlets in general? Or do you think that I think the specificity of radio and the reduction of reporters or the reduction of live local is so important to talk about, because even though you can make the argument, well, there's podcasts. Yeah, but it's a totally different thing. You've covered so many different stories. You broke the story statewide. Really, it was the first voice that anybody heard about the Washington Bridge. That's just one of so many examples of the role that radio plays. Your takeaways there.
Well, I take it back to the listeners, and I think that the listeners, the viewers, are getting their news in other ways, and it's more conducive to them. I think most people or younger people are starting to gravitate toward, not starting, but they have gravitated to online offerings, apps in their phone, say, and there's less call for traditional broadcast media, and even less call for newspapers. I hardly know. It's really the old timers who I know who are subscribing to newspapers and magazines, and others are finding other ways to find their news and information. And when we're in the car, a lot of people are listening to other satellite delivered services or their own music, that sort of thing, off their phones. So I think there's a real fragmentation, which it's been going on for years, but I think it's become more acute, and it certainly has trickled down into the news atmosphere locally. We're seeing whole newsrooms go away. We saw it just this month. Well, we're seeing it in sort of quick motion over at Channel 6 with the acquisition of their signal by the owners of Channel 10. Channel 12 is producing news for multiple channels. And so, this goes on. This has been happening for some time, and it's continuing.
Are you worried about the public's ability to get vital information in a pinch when it comes to specifically with radio and the delivery? And look, there's an argument that is being made by the radio industry right now to keep AM radio in cars. There's actually legislation in DC on this. And look, all around this country, there are places where there's internet droughts, and certainly some people get their farmer news from radio, but just the most vital element of it to me is the breaking news that happens. And your instinct, even for younger generations, is to turn on, in this case, in our market, WPRO or WGBH or WBR up in Boston or WBZ, and get that news. So it's still there. It's still a thing that people turn to. But when you have a reduction, is that specifically something that concerns you as a legend of the format?
I think it's slipping away. I think it's, if it's not uppermost in people's minds, they're not going to go there. They're not going to reach out to those outlets, even in times of stress. It's not going to be top of mind for them, I'm afraid. I think many people will go to the sources they're used to using. And if that's an app, if that's now, to be fair, the TV stations have really come a long way. I'm thinking of the TVs in Providence, have come a long way in trying to make digital first, which is to break stories, not wait until the 5 o'clock or 4:30 news, not wait until the 11 o'clock news to break stories, doing it on their online platforms and alerts and apps and that sort of thing. And I think that's good. Yeah. They're meeting the audience where they are, where they live. And, right. I think we're all trying to do that. When you have a diminishing newsroom, you have less of an ability to reach out and cover those stories that are breaking. You still are going to see crews go out and cover stories as they develop. But when you have a diminished newsroom, it makes it that much tougher.
Yeah. Another aspect of this is the arts, which has seen a diminished return in coverage for years. I think a lot of people would point to the Providence Phoenix's decline as a huge shift. But you've been a long time, now decade plus, more than that, a frontline reporter, really one of the leading reporters when it comes to the arts, specifically with your photography and interviews at the Newport festivals, covering things like the Narrow Center and Providence Performing Arts Center. And these are stories that are essential to the community that are, with your absence, for example, in WPRO, they're just not told anymore.
There are those people, reporters, and there are those niches. And people are finding them. People are finding that there are arts reporting, and they just gravitate to where they are. I think of Motif magazine, for example. They have an online presence as well, but they were a physical magazine that you can find used to be on cigarette machines everywhere, but now it's little news racks. That's just one example where, they really concentrate and focus on the arts. And there are other outlets that do that as well. Public broadcasting is an example. They each have a niche. Even when I was at WPRO, they even had other outside reporters who were engaged to provide online content when it came to covering shows, for example, coming to PPAC or some music outlets. And, our friend Rob Duguay, for example, is a guy who writes for numerous, I've lost track how many outlets he writes for in the arts space when it comes to music. So people are finding those, but there's less of a general. And I always did it because I enjoyed it, but I thought that there was a vacuum there, that people weren't getting arts coverage, and it meshed nicely for me. Also, you think back, I used to have, and before you came to work for the radio station, I had a morning show on Saturday mornings that I had to fill 7 segments a week with interviews, and so I'd be out and about and doing news interviews and arts interviews. It all came together. It was an eclectic mix, but I thought it worked, and I got a lot of compliments for it.
Yeah, it's a great show. Steve Klamkin in the Saturday Morning News with Doug Lizette at the anchor desk. That was appointment listening. And it's a huge
and we had
absence.
others doing the news as well, yeah. So my friend Laura Clarizio was another one, and Sharon Smith, names from the past. So,
looking at 2020,
I just want to make a note. We lost David Jones this week.
Yeah, we did.
You probably didn't work with David.
No, but I listened
for a short time. He was on Light 105 when I came into the building. And what a great guy! It's unfortunate, but. We're losing many of our mainstays that were in the media, and it's sad to see. It's a reminder we're all mortal, and all going to face these issues down the line.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
I should say the ultimate issue.
Yeah, the big one staring. It's not. It's not energy costs. Jones and Joan in the Morning was a huge show. I'm pretty sure I began listening on WSNE when I was in third grade, and it was one of those voices, both of them, that you just go, wow, this medium's iconic. Yeah, there's a great thing happening here. So rest in peace, and no doubt we're seeing, sadly, more and more of that happening around the country. And as a result, you just wonder, what's that vacuum look like? Sometimes it's disturbing to think that there may not be a huge class of people who are able to apply their craft in a way that, some of the long-standing voices in our community, for example, have been able to.
Yeah.
Looking at 2025 on the whole, biggest takeaway for you, you covered it with PRO, you've covered it now with Latino Public Radio on your own, and just kind of some of the biggest stories and biggest takeaways from 2025 locally from your standpoint.
Well, the Washington Bridge hasn't gone away, and it hasn't been fixed, and that's been going on for a few years now. And, it's one of those stories that is going to keep on giving. It's going to be more. I did not cover the hearings that came this fall nobody was really satisfied with the outcome of the hearing that was held by the legislature. But, we're going to see a new bridge getting built in the coming months. And so this is a story that's going to continue for several years. You advanced a couple of stories, a couple of story ideas for I don't know what you would pick a story of the year this year. One of the things that, I've kept my eye on, and I've even done some interviews around this, is the growing list of people who want to run for office next year. And that's, obviously next year is an off-year, we say off-year election. It's going to be a state election, and congressional is every 2 years and that sort of thing. So it'll be an interesting election year. We're starting to hear from some of those candidates who is going to be in the mix, both in Rhode Island and Massachusetts.
Right.
It's gotten interesting in Massachusetts because he was a long time in Congress, but a long time Senator Ed Markey's going to face some challenges, or primary challenge from Seth Moulton, for example. So remains to be seen what's going to be happening in Rhode Island in those congressional races and Senate. But, it's going to be interesting next year.
Yeah, no doubt the governor's race is going to be the big one. I think right now, we were even talking about this, we taped lively on Rhode Island PBS, that part of the Ocean State Media, as public broadcasting is now known this morning. And I made the remark, thinking back to probably the first Rhode Island election that I was paying attention to was the Democrat primary when Mirth York defeated Bruce Sunland. And I didn't know what was going on. I was paying attention to it. This feels like one of the most boring governor's races so far in terms of the energy early on. But then again, the key word, early on.
It is early. It's a year out, and we're just getting an inkling of who some of the players are going to be.
Right.
Some of them could be interesting. Excuse me. Some could bring some significant resources of their own into the race and not have to go out and shake the trees as much for money as some others are. Dan McKee also is looking like an uphill battle for him. Usually the powers of incumbency carry over, but that's not a given in his case because his approval rating is quite well underwater at this stage of the game. But, as Buddy Cianci used to say, you've got plenty of time to make up ground. If you're behind the eight ball, if you're not known, you have time to shape your image so that people get to know you in the way that you want to present yourself.
Right.
I will say, the thing that troubles me is, call me old-fashioned, call me old school, but gone are the days, it seems, when a candidate would stand up and make their announcement. Now, we had that this week in Aaron Gukian, who's in the race for governor on the Republican side, who actually came out, made an announcement, I'm running for governor. You don't see that much anymore. They usually do it in video. Why? Well, they get to control their message. They do slick video productions that, tell the story in the way that they want it to be told without any of these pesky reporters hanging around asking questions.
Right.
There's still some of the old school, stand up and make your announcement, but it's less and less.
Yeah. I think back to a couple of years ago, the congressional race, Jessica De La Cruz, the state senator, running for Congress, and we were out in Cranston, I can't remember, in Fung country, so to speak. And I remember
it was a restaurant there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We
were both there.
In Knightsville. And I remember she had some guy on stage that was wearing a baseball hat in the front row that said, I identify as non-binary. So she gets up there, gives this big presentation, the whole thing. And then, of course, here I come with the question, what's up with the hat? Is this how your campaign's going to be? And it got derailed and no ability to control the narrative. Of course, you and others asked legitimate policy and political questions, but you could tell right then and there.
Your question wasn't legitimate, but that's a fair question. Everything's a fair question, basically, if you're running for office. And now you're right. I don't know that she got much traction after that.
Yeah,
and I don't think that was necessarily the cause, but you want to be taken seriously, and if you have unusual circumstances, that's going to come to the fore.
Hasbro is a major story here in Rhode Island. Look, we saw this coming for a long time. It's not like overnight out of nowhere this happened, but your takeaways when you started to get word that Hasbro was packing up and heading to Boston as a news story, is this as big of a story as it maybe seems, or was this just the inevitable happening?
No, I think it's inevitable because, we saw this as a couple of years ago that I think back to the pandemic, and I think it was before the pandemic that there was this talk of, I think of Brian Goldner, who was the CEO at the time. I don't think he was of a mind to move the company out of state. He was well entrenched here, but with his passing and new leadership came in, I think it was pretty inevitable that they were going to take a hard-nosed look at their prospects. And, that building they have in Pawtucket is not ideal, and even though Rhode Island made a lot of overtures and a lot of promises, and, I don't know if any promises were made, but they certainly dangled some prospects in Providence and elsewhere for better facilities, and just didn't wash, I guess, with the leadership there. And now Hasbro is a company that's changed considerably. They were big into movies. They've shifted somewhat away from that. So there's a lot in motion there. So I think it was, as you say, it was more or less a given that they were going to move.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder how much political capital did the political leaders want to expend to try to keep them, let alone actual physical capital, the money that it would take to keep them. Now, it's a major Fortune 500 company that is leaving the state. It's going to leave one fewer major employer here, and likely going to be still some outposts of, I don't know if there will be anything remaining of Hasbro here in Rhode Island. Maybe you know better than I.
It's tough to say. It doesn't seem like it's going to be anything significant, that's for sure. Maybe employees commuting to Boston. But
not unlike the move of the Paw Sox to Worcester. It's got a psychic drain on Rhode Island's psyche, and I think people are going to view it in a negative way, and it's going to be long lasting, and it's going to cause a lot of resentment for a lot of people.
Yeah. That leads to another topic that I think is relevant. I remember, of course, the day that Larry Lucchino showed up at Pawtucket City Hall to make the announcement at Grebbian that the Pawtucket Red Sox were no longer Pawtucket Red Sox. They were becoming Worcester Red Sox. As I recall, you went to Worcester for an introductory press conference. Worcester, yeah. I drove to Cranston, and I parked in Nick Mattiello's District 15 and rolled the windows down in my car and blasted WPRO as that press conference was happening, because the behind the scenes was that had a lot to do with the political capital, if you will, in the then Speaker Mattiello's District 15. They polled that district. People in that district weren't too happy about a taxpayer-funded baseball stadium. That was not the only reason they left, but it was definitely a factor. That, of course, led to a day at the Blackstone Valley Tourism Council. I don't know, maybe it was 2019, maybe it was my timeline has been destroyed by COVID, but we were there covering Brett Johnson and the announcement that, guess what, we're getting a soccer team.
Just yesterday, some of those pictures came up. I don't know if it was the timing, just came up on my timeline in photos from that I was looking at yesterday.
Interesting.
When the soccer team was announced, football in your parlance.
Yes.
And, I think there was a lot of skepticism going about, and and I remember Don Grebbian, the mayor there, saying particularly that this was going to help restore people's psyche in Pawtucket, and the governor McKee ever since has always made it a point of saying that he felt the need to do things for Pawtucket. He didn't want Pawtucket to be left behind. So as a result, we have a big, beautiful. Have I been there since it opened? No. I've had some medical issues this year. I wasn't getting out and about as much. Have you been to the stadium?
I'm shocked. I drove by it the other night, and I looked at it and I was like, I can't believe I didn't go this year. I should have gone.
It looks beautiful. Yeah, it looks beautiful. Last year I had the opportunity, and it just didn't time out for me to go to their. They were playing games up at Bryant University. Right. I didn't have an opportunity to go, and I was somewhat regretful. I'd love to get to the stadium in Pawtucket. I think it looks fabulous from the outside. So,
yeah, and I think it's definitely worth noting that this was opening season for Rhode Island Football Club at the Tidewater. It was their second season in competition, but it was the first season at Tidewater. And look, when you have a major TIF-oriented, tax incremental financing-oriented infrastructure project of any kind, and it comes online successfully from the standpoint of optics anyway. I don't know how many tickets are sold versus given away, whatever. The stadium exists. Soccer's being played there. It's a story, no question about it, and a big one.
And they got into the playoffs, right?
Yeah, I think the team's pretty good. It's tough to tell. It's like one of those things. You go, how much is the buy-in? How much of the buy-in is going to be real versus Red Sox, Patriots, Friars, Rams, etc., Bruins, Celtics? It's a little different.
But remember, there are other sides to this coin, and part of the promise of the stadium was there's going to be other development nearby, including housing on the other side of the river. And we understand that's happening, at least in the permitting and so forth. So, that could well come to fruition.
Yeah,
maybe not in 26, but maybe down the line.
Yeah, the so-called B side of the project, which also includes a pedestrian bridge. And look, this is a historically challenging area when it comes to taxpayer-funded stadia. Look no further than the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, or wherever you go, some of these new NFL stadiums. There's a lot of promises. They are not usually the stadium opens, the team competes well before, if ever, those secondary aspects come online. Yeah. So it remains to be seen. What about the idea? I think Peter Nerona, obviously the outgoing Attorney General, has been one of the attorneys general on the front lines of lawsuits against the Trump administration. That is also, or that same conversation, we think of Judge McConnell and some of the decisions that have come out of there. You've covered courts for a long time. You've covered politics for a long time. Rhode Island being ground zero or a ground zero in this legal campaign against some of the decisions that the Trump administration has undertaken. Should that be viewed as a major story here in Rhode Island?
Oh, well, I think absolutely. I have to say a couple of things about Judge McConnell. Remember, he came out of the Democratic Party, very deep into the Democratic Party apparatus. He was a big campaign contributor to the party and to candidates before becoming a federal judge. And I've got to say, early in his tenure, I was in his courtroom a couple of times, just struck by how scrupulously fair he was on all kinds of matters. So, I don't think, I can't say that being a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat played a role or didn't play a role in any of these decisions. You hear about judge shopping, where people wanting to bring cases, the Trump administration finds their judges, the others who want to sue find their judges, and, I don't know how many cases he has going presently, but it's a few. Mm-hmm. And but I will say I've almost never seen a more fair judge. Even at the outset, the first step in suing the administration or any kind of lawsuit is to determine, is there probable cause? Is there reason to grant a temporary injunction, or in any number of cases? And I've seen him in that role, and very fair. So, I can't fault him in the least on what he has to face coming over the transom, so to speak. That said, it's not exactly ground zero here. I mean, there are other venues, other courts where a lot of these cases are being brought. And there's a lot of these cases, you name it. I mean, we had more this week.
Right.
I think when it comes to Peter Nerona, I think, he has strongly held beliefs, and in any number of areas. I don't know how many cases he has pending in against the Trump administration, or that he has signed on as
complainant or plaintiff, Mm-hmm.
Whatever. So, have we ever seen this many court cases involving any administration before? Probably not.
Yeah,
maybe the first Trump administration, but it's become a cottage industry, I imagine, for law firms.
Yeah,
and those law firms that didn't sign on to support Trump.
Well, that's a big factor as well. Another thing that I think is always important. Oh, please.
I feel a little liberated after 50 years as a reporter. I can kind of speak out on these things. I'm not staking out positions or that strongly, but I feel a lot more comfortable these days now that I'm not, having to play the middle of the road. But, it's an old habit that is hard to break.
Right.
I've been doing this for a long time and trying not to play favorites one way or the other. That's all.
Yeah, I think sometimes also and that's a great point, kind of going back to the shift in media.
You've never been shy.
Well,
I must point out.
Exactly. I think.
But you weren't exactly a news guy, so.
Right. And the very first time I think one of the first times I filled in for Dan, the feedback I got was, you gotta take strong opinions or not. There's right. You can't do this thing if you're doing it from a news standpoint. You want to do news. There's WCBS, there's WBZ, 1010 wins, etc., and maybe an opportunity at WPRO someday. But it was kind of like, if you want to be, if you're going to fill in from 3 to 6, you can't just do a news show, unfortunately.
No, agreed. Mm-hmm.
When you think about the Newport festivals this year and you've covered a lot of other great arts events. Obviously, your photography is incredible, and it's often used even by those events. The folk festival and jazz festival have used your material. Those events to me, it seems like at the same time as they're becoming more and more exclusive and difficult to access because of ticket availability or scarcity, really, and prices, they seem to be growing in popularity and strength. And I thought this was just a great year on both festivals.
Oh, this year, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you know the pre-sale has begun this week for the Folk Festival?
It's crazy, right?
And those tickets, I don't know about the pre-sale, but when the tickets finally do go on sale, usually it's the beginning of the new year, they get snapped up in about 10, 15 minutes, 50,000 tickets. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they had complete sellouts in both the folk and jazz festivals this year at Newport. And this is happening. Now, there are festivals that are healthy and festivals that are less so. Some have fallen by the wayside because it's a difficult thing to put on a festival like this, and it's become more costly. And a number of them have folded. But others are going great guns, and Newport is the granddaddy of both the jazz and the folk scenes. They were first out of the blocks in both cases back in the 50s and early 60s. I think they're healthy.
Yeah.
We don't have anything to point otherwise, so I think they'll continue to go great guns. There was not a lot, but there was some discontent about the lineup in the folk festival this year. But I don't think you would find anybody that complained bitterly, saying, "Oh, my favorite artists aren't here" or whatever.
Right.
And oh my goodness, the jazz festival was a cornucopia of big names in the jazz world, and even the little known artists who they brought up for the first time were just tremendous. So tremendous lineup.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you want to go with this. Bill,
I just think
I think a grand time was had by all.
And I think it jumps out as it's such an important piece, economic development wise, but just culturally. You talk about that psychic component of Hasbro leaving, having the festivals in Rhode Island is such a boost to what we. Or even just looking at it on a Southern New England basis, it's such a boost regionally to the psyche of this community.
And this goes back a couple of years when the state, in the form of Gina Raimondo, the governor at the time, signed a long-term arrangement to keep the festivals here at Newport in Fort Adams. And I thought that was a good move, and I think we're going to see it continue to pay dividends for Rhode Island down the line. It's a great place. It's not ideal, but it's a great place where you can bring people together and people can enjoy themselves.
Absolutely.
There are other events going on there outside of the folk and jazz festivals, and others recognize what a great space that is for big crowds, say.
Absolutely.
But again, they generally cap the attendance at those festivals at about 10,000 a day.
Right.
So you don't want it to get. It can feel overwhelming at times. I got to tell you.
Well, we're lucky as media members. We have a place to hide, kind of quasi backstage. So we at least have.
Yeah,
that
but
to
even
retreat.
then, it gets pretty crowded.
Yeah. Any other major stories or interesting things from this year? Obviously, a unique year for you, and you're in terms you just bouncing from PRO to retire now with LPR.
I think toward the end of the year, when we had this government shutdown and the SNAP benefits were on the verge of being suspended, and really for a few days they were. It was furious at the end there, where real dire consequences were being predicted, and there was going to be some real pain there. And broad-based. I mean, was it 140,000 people in Rhode Island relied? I mean, that's close to more than 10% of the population dependent on food assistance from the government. I thought that was particularly high on the list, I think, of stories this year, and a lot of focus on that toward the latter part of the year.
No doubt. And I think with that comes just a lot of uncertainty about other things that are caught in the crosshairs of Trump, and that would include offshore wind, which is a major component of our economy, and the suspension briefly, and the Revolution Wind project. All of a sudden, that was suspended at 80% complete. You look at this stuff and you go, wow, it's ready, fire, aim every single day. And these impact people. These stories, this is real. Food stamps, 10% of the population. I mean, that alters the way that people approach their lives in a significant way if you lose your food stamps.
Now, here we are a few weeks before the end of the year. And what was it, just day before yesterday? We're recording this on a Thursday. The administration was threatening to withhold funds from Rhode Island if it didn't get in line on a number of fronts. Who was it? The
voter registration.
Interior.
Yeah.
The voter registration is another case. Yep. So, those battles are going to carry into next year, maybe beyond. I think back to the early days of the first Trump administration when you had these pitched, I don't want to say battles, but, people getting deported or facing the prospect of deportation and cadres of lawyers going to the airports to help those who were facing getting turned around or deported or even getting locked up.
Yeah.
So, on any number of fronts, a lot of this legal action is going to continue into the new year and probably beyond.
Yeah, and no doubt.
You got to remember, a lot of these civil cases move slowly. Generally speaking, there've been quick actions on a number of these cases because of imminent cutoff of funds or that sort of thing. But on the whole, once you have a restraining order in place, it could take a long time to resolve some of these cases.
Yeah, and no doubt we didn't talk about it, but immigration nationally, major story, of course, in ICE, but even here in our own community, look, it is. We see it outside of courthouses, ICE agents, people in masks. It's created. And look, as a reporter, I know you've got a lot of police sources. I certainly have spoken with police officers at the state and local levels who are going, what in the world is going on? This is completely out of control, and it impacts the way that we think about law enforcement now, because all of a sudden, are we fighting two fronts where we've got, for example, the ICE officers that scooped up a judicial intern a couple of weeks ago by mistake. Right. Oops, only one example of just an influx of really scary stuff. I think that I will say that even from an objective standpoint, because even if you're pro immigration enforcement, nobody can see what's happening right now and go, yeah, that makes sense. This is the way we should be doing it.
I think there are other parts of the country that felt that way. I think they're starting to see things differently, see things in a way that New England has seen it from go, which is, this isn't in keeping with what America has been and stands for. And I think people in other parts of the country are starting to question what's going on there in that space, with ICE going out and snaring people off the streets and shipping them out without consideration, without trials and without hearings even.
Yeah, it does. It runs against the grain of what the fundamentals, the Constitution is based on. And again, that's something that even some Republicans have been talking about a little bit. Again, maybe not on Twitter or on talk radio, but you meet them at a coffee shop to catch up, and they're going, yeah, this isn't what we had in mind. It doesn't look or feel like this, what we had in mind. So we'll see where that one goes. Just kind of lastly, or in closing, certainly have a decent-sized amount of people that are going to be hearing this on WPRO, because the Bartholomew Town podcast airs on WPRO since Saturday at 3. Mm-hmm. To the WPRO.
Hi, Steve Klamkin, Latino Public Radio News.
Yeah, there it is. Excellent.
Which, by the way, you can find us at lprnews.org.
lprnews.org. Ronaldo Almonte, Steve Klamkin, they're out there getting it done, and vital parts of our shrinking, but still very important and aggressive and institutionalized. And I don't mean that in the sense of, you know the business, where the bodies are buried, news media.
I know you saw the interview I did with the folks from Channel 12.
Yep.
And one of the first questions Kim Kalunian wanted to ask me was, what about that sign-off, Steve? So I worked it in for her. I did it for you. So
Well, you beat me to the punch. So Steve Klamkin, a legend, no doubt about it. And hey, we'll catch up soon and look forward to seeing you out there on the trail with LPR. And we'll look for that content coming from Latino Public Radio. They certainly scored with you involved in the operation now.
Thanks, Bill. Always a pleasure.
Bartholomew Town is brought to you by Navigant Credit Union, Half Street Group, the University of Rhode Island Online, and Newport Film.